Norm, thank you. Thank you very, very much. Thank you all, 14,000 strong or more. Howard Friedman and Executive Director Howard Corr, incoming President Bob Cohen, incoming Chairman Michael Kassin, outgoing Chairman Lee Rosenberg, and Ambassador Ron Dermer and Ambassador Dan Shapiro. I don't know where our ambassadors are. Would they? Somebody ought to applaud both of them here. There they are, Dan Shapiro and Dermer. Let me tell you, it really is an enormous pleasure for me to be able to be here. It's a privilege. And good to see so many friends, all 14,000 of you. A little frightening to see myself on about 8, 9, 10 screens up here. The last time I spoke to AIPAC, I joined your national summit in Napa Valley. I did it via satellite. And you were in the vineyards. I was overseas, different kind of vineyard. So today I think I'm getting the better end of the deal because I'm here with you in person, and your wine selection is a lot more limited this time. I have to tell you, I had the pleasure of speaking to AIPAC back in the 1990s. It was a great honor, and every time I come here, whether I get a chance to talk to a smaller group during the daytime sessions or otherwise, this is a remarkably inspiring gathering. People from every corner of the country coming together to demonstrate our deep support as Americans for a strong U.S.-Israel relationship. And it is no exaggeration. It's not just words to say that every single one of you brings here such a special passion to a cause that you so fiercely believe in. And let me tell you something, unequivocally, after almost 30 years in the United States Senate, I can tell you that is precisely why AIPAC's work is in the best traditions of American democracy, and I thank you for practicing it. I want you to know that in my judgment, these democratic values are stamped in the DNA of both the United States and Israel. But we also share something much deeper than that. Like no other two countries on the planet, against the deepest odds, both America and Israel confidently, purposefully set out to be examples to the world. Think about it. From its earliest days, Israel has always said it's not enough just to be one of many in a community of nations. Israel has strived since Isaiah's time to serve as a light unto the nations. And that responsibility to be a light unto the nations sounds actually unbelievably similar to something that we as Americans know is part of who we are too. My grandfather, 10 times over, too hard to count in other terms, was a man by the name of John Winthrop. And he came to what was then the New World. And he came in search of freedom, freedom to worship as he wished. He was a minister. He and his congregants were outcasts, persecuted, heading into a rough and unforgiving land with no guarantee even of survival. And on his way here, he delivered a now fairly famous sermon at sea, in which he called on his community to create a city upon a hill in their new home, America. So whether you call it a city upon a hill or a light unto the nations, it actually means the same thing. Being a model to the world. It means having a home that sets a standard of dignity and a standard of freedom. So the foundation of the friendship between the American people and the people of Israel was actually laid centuries before a single stone was set under the U.S. Capitol or under the Knesset. And looking around this room tonight, it is clear that our friendship has never been stronger. I'll tell you why. Because today, as Israel faces serious challenges to her future, it is America that will stand firmly by her side. I will tell you that with the leadership of President Obama, and you can look it up, you can measure it, this is not exaggeration, it's a matter of fact, there has been a complete, unmatched commitment to Israel's security. The record of this administration in providing aid and assistance, consultation, weapons, help, standing up in various international fora, fighting, I am proud to tell you, is unrivaled. And the bottom line, pure and simple, has been making sure that Israel has the means to defend itself by itself and defending Israel's right to be able to do so. That is what we've done. Security. Security is fundamentally what President Obama is committed to. And so, too, is he committed to using the full force of our diplomacy to resolve the two great questions that most matter when it comes to ensuring the security of Israel: preventing a nuclear Iran and ending the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Now, let me start with Iran, because I know there are many questions. I know many people. There's been a healthy debate about the approach. We welcome that. But let me sum up President Obama's policy in 10 simple, clear words, unequivocal. We will not permit Iran to obtain a nuclear weapon, period. Now, I added an 11th word just for punctuation. But I want you to understand there are no ifs, ands, or buts. This is not a political policy. This is a real foreign policy. And we mean every word of what we say. You have the word of the President of the United States that Iran will not get a nuclear weapon. Now, as we said at the outset, and I say it again today, our diplomacy is guided by a simple bottom line. No deal is better than a bad deal. And we absolutely will not accept a bad deal. We are committed to a deal that gets the job done. Why? Because we get it. We understand it. As President Obama said in Jerusalem, no one can question why Israel looks at the Iranian program and sees an existential threat. We understand it. We understand it in our gut. And we also know something else. This is not some favor that we do for Israel. This is something that is also in the interests of the United States of America. And it's in the interests of countries surrounding Israel. A nuclear bomb for Iran would also threaten the stability of the region, indeed the entire world. It would produce an arms race among the surrounding countries. There is no way the world is safer anywhere in the world with a nuclear weapon in Iran, and we are not going to let it happen, period, end of story. Now, to do that, to achieve this all-important goal, important for America's security and for Israel's security, it is crucial that we seize what might be the last best chance to be able to have diplomacy work, and maybe the last chance for quite some time. Because the reality is only strong diplomacy can fully and permanently achieve the goal. Those who say strike and hit need to go look at exactly what happens after you've done that. Whether that permanently eliminates the program or opens up all kinds of other possibilities, including Iran leaving the Nuclear Proliferation Treaty, not even allowing IAEA inspectors in, not living under any international regimen. That's a possibility. Only strong diplomacy can guarantee that a nuclear weapons program actually goes away for good, instead of just going underground and becoming more dangerous. Only the exhaustion of diplomacy can justify more forceful options if you have to take them in the end. So we say, President Obama, myself, and others, we say, let's seize the diplomatic moment. And that's what we are trying to do. And the truth is, it is strong diplomacy that has actually made this moment possible. And we need to give it the space to work. We need to make sure that if this opportunity were to elude us, it is not because we are the ones that close the window. Now, I understand the skepticism. Been around this city for 29 plus years as a senator, became chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, worked with most of the members of your board and with AIPAC and others around the country, and proud to tell you that during that time I had a 100% voting record for Israel. And I'm not coming here to stand up in front of you and tell you that I know that Iran is going to reach an agreement. I don't know. I don't know what they'll do. I don't know if they are able to make some of the tough decisions they're going to have to make in the months ahead. But I know that if the United States is going to be able to look the world in the eye and say we have to do something, we have to have exhausted the possibilities available to us for that diplomatic, peaceful resolution. Let me make it clear. Our approach is not Ronald Reagan's and the Soviets. We're not looking at this and saying trust but verify. Our approach is a much more complex and dangerous world, is verify and verify. And that's what we intend to do. Now, there is very good reason for these sanctions to exist in the first place, and good reason that we have kept the architecture of these sanctions in place. And we continue to enforce it, even as we negotiate a comprehensive agreement. In the last weeks, we have announced additional sanctions with respect to individuals who have been tempted to go around it or violate it. We have not changed one piece of the sanctions architecture, and yet we are able to negotiate. Our eyes, my friends, are wide open. This is not a process that is open-ended. This is not a process that is about trusting Tehran. This is about testing Tehran. And you can be sure that if Iran fails this test, America will not fail Israel. That I promise. Now, we have taken no options off the table, but so far there is no question but that tough sanctions and strong diplomacy are already making Israel and America safer. The first step agreement, it's not an interim agreement, it's a first step agreement. And the agreement that's enforced today didn't just halt the advance of the Iranian nuclear program for the first time in a decade, it's actually rolled it back. And we all remember how Prime Minister Netanyahu highlighted Iran's 20% enriched uranium in the 2012 speech at the United Nations. Well, today, Iran is reducing its stockpile of 20% uranium. And without the agreement enforced today, the opposite would have been in effect. The stockpile would have grown even more dangerous, and the amount of breakout time that they had would have grown smaller. Because of the agreement, Iran will soon have to take its entire stock of 20% enriched uranium down to zero. 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 You don't have to be a math major to know that Israel is safer when Iran has zero uranium enriched to 20%. And that's what we've achieved. The same independent inspectors who also tell us that Iran has halted its advances on the heavy water reactor known as the Arak reactor, Without the agreement in force today, we could not have stopped them from making progress on the Iraq heavy water reactor, plutonium reactor. Iran has also stopped enriching all uranium above 5%, and it has given inspectors daily access to the facilities at Natanz and at Fordow. You know Fordow, you've heard about it, that underground facility that was a secret for so long. We've never had people in it. But because of this first step agreement, we now have people inside Fordow every single day telling us what is happening. None of these things would have happened without forceful diplomacy by the United States and our international partners. But now, my friends, we have to finish the job. Like I tell my staff, there aren't any exit polls in foreign policy. It's results that count, final results. And that means we have to let forceful diplomacy keep working in order to put this test to Iran. Now, right now, we are carefully, and I mean carefully, negotiating a comprehensive agreement. We are consulting with our friends in Israel constantly. The minute Undersecretary Wendy Sherman finished her last set of meetings in Vienna the other day, she went immediately to Israel, briefed thoroughly on the talks, then went to Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates and continued to brief and briefed our European partners. You might be asking, if no deal is better than a bad deal, what does the United States consider a good deal? Well, you have my word, and the President's, that the United States will only sign an agreement that answers three critical questions the right way. First, will it make certain that Iran cannot obtain a nuclear weapon? Second, can it continuously assure the world that Iran's program remains entirely peaceful as it claims? And third, will the agreement increase our visibility on the nuclear program and expand the breakout time so that if they were to try to go for a bomb, we know we will have time to act? Those are the tests. Those are our standards for any comprehensive agreement. It's that simple. And those objectives, if they're not met, then there won't be an agreement. Now, make no mistake. Make no mistake. We can't resolve the answer to those questions. It's up to Iran. It's up to Iran to prove to the world that its program is peaceful, and the world will hold Iran accountable. Now, if it turns out that Iran cannot address the world's concerns, I guarantee you it will face more pressure. Iran will face more pressure, more and more isolation. And Congress will introduce more tough sanctions. And let me assure you, I know Eric Cantor is here, sitting here, I assure you, it'll take about 2 hours to get it through the House and the Senate, and it won't be delayed, and the Congress will have to do nothing more than schedule the vote, because President Obama and I fully support those sanctions under those circumstances. In the meantime, as I said earlier, we are enforcing every letter of the existing sanctions. I have personally instructed every State Department bureau and mission around the world to watch vigilantly for any signs of the sanctions being skirted. And to any country that wants to trade with Iran, with these sanctions firmly in place, the United States will tell them exactly what I have told foreign leaders in no uncertain terms. Iran is not open for business until Iran is closed for nuclear bombs. Now, strong diplomacy is also essential to another threat to Israel's security, ending the conflict with the Palestinians, and in doing so, preserving the Jewish and democratic nature of the State of Israel. I've had some folks ask me why I'm so committed to these negotiations and why I'm so convinced that peace is actually possible. And they ask, why does John Kerry go to Israel so often? I think I heard Steny Hoyer say he'd been there 13 times. Eric Cantor's been there 12 times. I've been there more times than that just in the last 9 months. And I've been to the Middle East more times than even that in the last months, because I don't always wind up going to Israel. But apart from the question, I'm surprised people ask, because apart from my affection for Israel, which dates back to my first visit back in 1986, it just strikes me that it's the wrong question to ask, why do I go? This isn't about me. This is about the dreams of Israelis and the dignity of Palestinians. It's about reconciling two peoples who want, at long last, to live normal, secure lives in the land that they have fought over for so long. It's about answering King David's timeless call that we seek peace and pursue it. It's about fulfilling the fervent prayer for peace that Jews around the world recite to welcome Shabbat. It's about parents from Zafat to Eilat who want to raise their families in a region that accepts the nation state of the Jewish people is here to stay. Now, it's not news to any Israeli to hear me say that they live in a difficult neighborhood. Israelis know that better than anyone. No one needs to explain the importance of peace and security to a mother who has just sent her daughter to the army, or a son who is waiting for his father to come home from another mission. No one knows the stakes of success or failure better than those who will inherit them for generations to come. And I have seen all of these realities in so many different ways in my travels in Israel, from the rocket casings in Sderot to the shelter in Kiryat Shimona that I visited years ago where children had to hide from Katyusha rockets. I've seen it. My friends, I also believe that we are at a point in history that requires the United States, as Israel's closest friend and the world's preeminent power, to do everything we can to help end this conflict once and for all. Now, that is why America helped bring the parties back to the table, where, let's be honest, Israelis and Palestinians have difficult choices to make. No one understands just how complex those choices are, or how emotional they are, better than the leaders who have to summon the courage in order to actually make them. I have sat with Bibi Netanyahu for hours and hours and days and days. We have become good friends. I believe, in fact, he ought to be charging me rent. I've seen up close and personally the grit and the guts of this man and his love of country. And I can tell you with absolute certainty and without question, Prime Minister Netanyahu has demonstrated his courage and his commitment in pursuit of peace with security. He knows that it is the only way for Israel to be a Jewish and democratic state, not a binational state. As President Obama said publicly in the Oval Office today, and I quote him, Prime Minister Netanyahu has approached these negotiations with a level of seriousness and commitment that reflects his leadership and the desire of the Israeli people for peace. Thus far, I will tell you also that President Abbas, and I know there are many doubters here, I've heard the arguments for 30-plus years, 40 years, that there's no partner for peace, that Abbas won't be there, that, both sides, by the way, say the same thing about each other. That's one of the difficulties we have to try to get through here. Very small needle to try to thread in terms of the trust deficit. Thus far, President Abbas, I will tell you, has demonstrated He wants to be a partner for peace. He's committed to trying to end the conflict and all of its claims, but he obviously has a point of view about what's fair and how he can do that. Let's be candid. I know that some of you doubt that. But as Israeli security officials will attest, President Abbas has been genuinely committed against violence, and his own security forces have worked closely with Israel in order to prevent violence against Israeli citizens. I've also spent many hours with President Abbas, and I believe that he clearly understands both the tremendous benefits of peace and the great costs of failure. He understands that in terms of his own people, his own grandchildren, the country he hopes to be able to lead, and in terms of the history that beleaguers all. He knows the Palestinian people will never experience the self-determination that they seek in a state of their own without ending the conflict in a solution that delivers two states for two peoples. And so does Prime Minister Netanyahu. When Bibi looks me in the eye and says, I can't accept a deal with the Palestinians that doesn't make the people of Israel safer, we agree 100%. But I argue that there is a distinction between a unilateral withdrawal from Lebanon or from Gaza, where nothing is resolved, and a phased withdrawal that is negotiated, where everything is, at least in an agreement, resolved. Now, I learned about Israel's security on many different trips over there, but one stands out. I've been a pilot since I was in college, and I was on a trip over there. I was having a luncheon at Uvda Air Base with the Israeli Air Force, and the colonel who was in charge had flown. He was an ace from the Six-Day War. And we were having lunch at the time at Uvda, and I had been badgering them to maybe let me go up and fly. And he disappeared at lunch, and finally he comes back and he says, Senator, I hope you don't eat too much. We're going flying. And I said, wow, great. This is what I've wanted. And we went out, the two of us, drove out to this jet. And he trusted me. Well, we put on our helmets, got in the jet, and he says, the moment we're off the ground, it's your airplane. So literally, we took off. I take the stick. We go up. We're flying around. Next thing I know, in my ear, he says, Senator, you better turn faster. You're going over Egypt. So I turned very fast, and then I asked him if I could do some aerobatics over the Negev. And I turned upside down and did a big loop, and I was coming down. I was looking upside down, and I said to myself, this is perfect. I can see all of the Sinai. I can see Aqaba. I can see Jordan. I see all of Israel below me, each side to each side. I said, this is the perfect way to see the Middle East upside down and backwards. I understand it. The real point of this story is just to tell you that I can't tell you the imprint on me of being up there and tiny, you know, almost turning, you have barely space to turn. You get the sense of a missile from here or a rocket from there or the threat of war. You understand it's impossible to ignore just how narrow those borders are, how vulnerable Israel can be, and why Israel's security is our first priority. We understand that. That is why, my friends, President Obama sent a four-star general, John Allen, one of the most respected minds in the United States military, to do something we've never done in all the history of administrations negotiating for Israel's and Palestinians' future. And that is to work with Israelis and Jordanians and Palestinians to make the Jordan River border as strong as the strongest borders on earth. That's what makes this effort different from anything we've ever done before. With the combination of the best military experience America can offer and the best ideas in the Pentagon and the best technology that we can deliver, we believe we can deliver to Israel security that Israel needs in order to make peace, and President Obama is committed to doing that. Now, we have no illusions. We saw what happened after Israel withdrew unilaterally from Gaza and Lebanon. We all learned lessons from that, I hope. That's why a negotiated agreement is so important. That's why the security arrangements that we are helping to design will need to be operationally proven. We're not doing this on a whim and a prayer. We will never let the West Bank turn into another Gaza. My friends, we understand that Israel has to be strong in order to make peace, but we also understand that peace will make Israel stronger. Now, any peace agreement must also guarantee Israel's identity as a Jewish homeland. As Ehud Barak said on this stage last year, a two-state solution is the only way for Israel to stay true to its founding principles, to remain both Jewish and democratic. At last year's AIPAC conference, he said, "Statehood is not a favor for the Palestinians," and let me reaffirm, he is right. It is not. Israel also needs peace in order to create greater prosperity. All of you here know the great economic benefits of peace. All of you have already seen what Israel has already been able to build with the forces of the region arrayed against it. Just imagine what it will be able to build as a result of peace with Palestinian neighbors. I've had the foreign minister of one of the surrounding countries, a very wealthy country, and a very smart foreign minister say to me, if we make peace, this is under the Arab Peace Initiative and the Arab Follow-On Committee that is following everything we're doing very closely and supporting it. And they said, if we make peace, Israel will trade more in this community within a few years than it trades with Europe today. That's what we have available to us. And I believe that we need to stand together with a single voice to reject any of the arbitrary, unwarranted boycotts of Israel. For more than 30 years, I have staunchly, loudly, unapologetically opposed boycotts of Israel, and I will continue to oppose those boycotts of Israel. That will never change. Every time that Israel is subjected to attacks on its legitimacy, whether at the United Nations or from any nation, the United States will use every tool we have to defeat those efforts, and we will stand with Israel. Finally, peace demands that Israel fulfill its destiny not just as a nation, but also as a neighbor. And that begins with the Palestinians, and it extends to the entire Arab League, whose Arab Peace Initiative can open the door to peace and normalized relations with 20 additional Arab countries and a total of 55 Muslim countries. The upheaval in the Middle East has shown us all that Arabs and Israelis share some of the very same security concerns. Without the Palestinian conflict to divide them, these common interests can grow into real relationships and transform Israel's standing in the region. And I just invite you, I promise you, these conversations take place. I've had them throughout the Gulf region, throughout the Middle East, where increasingly those countries begin to see the possibilities of mutual security interests coming together for all of them against an Iran, against terrorism, against religious extremism. This is a commonality that is a new thread in the region, and I believe it brings the potential of new possibilities. It is also important to remember that ending the conflict means ending the incitement. President Abbas has called incitement a germ that must be removed, and he has sought our help in order to try to deal with the problem. And I can tell you that with any final agreement, it will also include a larger endeavor in order to help people on both sides move beyond a painful past and promote a culture of peace and tolerance. After all these years, my friends, it is really no mystery what the end game really looks like. I think you know that in your hearts. We understand what the end game is. I know what peace looks like. When I talk to Prime Minister Netanyahu and others, I think everybody shares this because this is not new. After Camp David and Oslo and Y and Annapolis and Taba and all of these efforts, what the end game should look like is straightforward. Security arrangements that leave Israelis more secure, not less. Mutual recognition of the nation state of the Jewish people and the nation state of the Palestinian people. An end to the conflict and to all claims. A just and agreed solution for Palestinian refugees. One that does not diminish the Jewish character of the state of Israel. And a resolution that finally allows Jerusalem to live up to its name as the city of peace. It will take hard work. I'm not pretending any of the answers. These are all narrative issues. They're tough issues. They're complicated. But there is a vision of peace. And it takes tough choices on both sides, especially over the coming days. I guarantee you that America, that President Obama and this administration will be there every day of the week, every step of the way. And we will stand with Israel's leaders today and with the leaders of the future. And we will ensure that our light shines not just throughout the nations, but throughout the generations. Leaders like a fellow named Guy, I leave his last name out, but he's a young Israeli who took part in an exchange program with the State Department, sponsors, that brings Israelis and Palestinians together to talk about their histories and their hopes. Guy's grandparents fled Europe. He was born and raised in Jerusalem. He served in the IDF, and he worked as an entrepreneur in Israel's booming tech industry. And this is what he said in that program. We respect our past, but we don't want to live it. We are young enough to dream, to believe that change is possible and that fear can be defeated. I think Guy is right. Change is possible. Fear can be defeated. But those are choices we have to make now. My friends, a few months ago I landed in Tel Aviv, and it was the 18th anniversary of Yitzhak Rabin's assassination. I went straight to Kikar Rabin, and I stood with the late Prime Minister's daughter, Dalia, at the site of her father's murder. And we stood just steps away from where the great general, in the last moments of his life, sang the famous lyrics of Shir LeShalom. Don't whisper a prayer, sing the song of peace in a loud voice. Don't say the day will come, bring that day. That is our mission, all of us, in whatever capacity that we can, but just as important, our mission is also to raise our voices for peace, and we also need to listen. We have to listen to those who first gave voice to our values, voices that still echo thousands of years later. I think it was the first time I went to Israel. I spent a week there and went all over the country, and like many first-time visitors, I climbed Masada. I climbed it with a guide. Some of you may know him or heard of him, a fellow by the name of Yadin Roman. Yadin, the publisher of Eretz Israel. And our group debated Josephus Flavius's account of what happened on the top of that mountain. The account of what happened 2,000 years before we were there. Then Yadin, after we'd had this long debate, made us all vote to determine, did it happen as he recounted or was it different? And we all voted unanimously it did happen the way he recounted. He told us to then walk to the edge of the precipice, which we did, and to look out across the chasm and to shout, to shout across the ancestral home of the Jewish people. And as we stood where every new Israeli soldier begins his or her service by swearing an oath to honor that history and secure the future, Yadin instructed us to shout all at the same time, Am Yisrael Chai. We shouted. And then I have to tell you, echoing across the chasm in the most eerie and unbelievably unforgettable way were these haunting echoes of Am Yisrael Chai, Am Yisrael Chai, Chai, Chai. I'll never forget hearing the echo of those words bouncing off that mountain. It was literally like we were hearing the voices of the souls of those who had perished, sacrificing their lives for Israel 1,000 years ago. And we were affirming those words. The state of Israel lives. The people of Israel live. We have to listen to those voices. Those long ago who encouraged us to build a city on a hill, to be a light unto the nations, an example to the world, to ensure Israel's survival. And we have to listen to the voices of young people whose futures depend on the choices that we, the leaders of today, make. It's for their future that we will give new strength to the U.S.-Israel partnership, as AIPAC does like no other organization in our country. It's for their future that we will come together giving greater voice to the timeless oath, and we will remember forever those words and be driven by them. Am Yisrael Chai will be said generations upon generations into the future because of the work you do and the work we will do together. Thank you all very, very much. Honor to be with you.